Alright, so last time we showed how we bedded down that first little piece of floor there. We pulled those fillets around there. We put the glass in on the side walls there, that 1208 or 7, yeah. And then now we're going to start working on these braces that are going to come across there from that bulkhead or that transverse over to the front. And so this is what happened after we finished with the glass, and you can see now we're going to put in these pieces right here, and we're going to get after it and close this compartment all the way up. Alright, so this is kind of the start. You can see I've got the pieces there, that E9. There's two of those, and I'm just trying to figure out how to use a couple of brackets here to keep those pieces, vertically straight. So I'm just working on how to clamp them, how to position them, where to do them. I have lines made on the transverse bulkhead, and then there you can see them on the bow, so I can orient those and know exactly where they're supposed to go. So that's all I'm trying to figure out right now, is how to get it started. Then we're going to go in there and we're going to pull some fillets along the edges, kind of set those pieces, kind of glue it where it's supposed to be, and we'll let that set up. And then after it sets up, we'll pull these brackets here off, and we'll come back and pull some glass in here. So that's going to be the process, and we'll see how that plays out. As I commented many times here, I kind of like to show my whole process, and you can see that I'm kind of struggling there trying to figure out how those things are going to work. But now I think I got a plan. I'm going to go ahead and take, and I'm just wetting out with some neat epoxy the edges of that plywood. And remember, this is marine grade plywood that I've had, and I've had it now for a good while, and it's been stored, so it is dry as a powder house for the most part. So wherever this epoxy is going, I'm trying to just give me a nice little bed of epoxy and glue so that it sticks well. And so if somebody's not familiar with this process, this is just epoxy that's got some Cabosil in it, which is called thickened epoxy. And you just kind of take it with that little spreader there. Sometimes I use like a little wooden tongue depressor, stir, or whatever, but this is kind of a new tool. I'll talk about it in a little while. And what you do is you just spread that glue, because it's going to turn hard. You just spread that at your connection, and that will glue it to the sidewall, glue it to the edge, but it also gives you a nice smooth curved surface when you go to come back to put your glass down. So everything, all your glass stays in with a good surface contact, and some of that glass will get stiff and it doesn't want to turn too sharp. So this is a 1-inch little spatula here. Sometimes you'll see me pulling for all the bottoms. On the inside we pulled 2-inch fillets, so that 1808, which is a much thicker cloth, makes it a lot easier for it to turn those corners and stuff. So I'm just kind of spreading it in here, and we'll let this cure, and once it cures we'll pull those brackets and all off. It'll be stuck, and then we can get in there and glass it. So that's going to be the process that we're following from this point. And here you can see me using my trusty little spatula. So after I kind of get that thickened epoxy in there where I want it, this spatula is really, really soft. and it does a really good job as you run it along there, and it just helps to smooth it all out so you don't have any rough points or edges. And I like to just kind of wrap that, because you wind up getting this stuff on your hands as you're swapping tools. So I like to wrap that spatula in a napkin there, so it just makes it a lot easier to clean.
All right, well, it wasn't the prettiest job I've ever done. Been a little out of practice, but you could see kind of made those little brackets there to kind of help keep it straight up and down while I was working it. And I wet all that out so that tomorrow I'm gonna come back and try and put some glass on that. So I kind of got just both sides a little bit more than just kind of stuck in there. I guess that gives you a good little picture there. Like I said, it's not the prettiest job I've ever done. This little section here, let me back out. Both of these little side sections, they'll actually be full of foam too. So, and then we're gonna put a little anchor hatch right here. And once again, this actually turned out to be a lot bigger than what I was thinking. So ought to work out pretty good. Also, my tool of the day, I wanted to talk about this. This is like an angled, it's like a cake, I don't know, a cake icing thing or whatever. I got it in like a little 3 or 4 pack. I'll put a link up there or somewhere. And I got longer ones or whatever, but it does have a perfect little 1-inch radius on it. So it's real good for getting in that corner, getting in there. And the fact that it's offset helps it to, sometimes you can use it backwards and then you turn it, especially in here, like where it's a tight area. So this is something that'd really be good. Just kind of wipe it off with some denatured alcohol afterwards, and it's good to go.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and cut all of our fiberglass pieces so that we already have them fit and formed and shaped and cut and trimmed however we need them, because sometimes in the corners you'll need to cut a little wedge out or cut a splice where you can overlap them. And I'm sure I've covered that before, but here you can see this is some 10-ounce glass that we're just putting in there, and I like to mark my edges so that when I wet it out or whatever, I know exactly where it's supposed to go. And the same thing here, you'll see this process a little bit more. And once again, I can't talk enough good things about those little clippers that I'm using, those little rechargeable scissors or whatever they're called. I think there's a link. We'll talk through that. I have a whole sheet on Google Drive, a Google sheet that's got all the stuff that I've used and the links, and to help you if you want to know what I've been using or something like that, you can get it from there. You can buy it. I do make a little bit of money off of the commission sales on that, but all I'm trying to do is help pay for this build here, and have a few things and do some more giveaways and stuff. We did a boat plan giveaway before, so we're going to try and do some more of that. And that's what those little things, they all just help to make this stuff possible. So now that we got all the glass measured out, you see we vacuum up. I try and keep everything clean, and then I take that little icing cake spatula there and just start running back through there and cleaning those fillets up. And actually on this bottom here, you see me using a flat edge scraper a lot, because that transition is so gentle, I guess. It has such a big radius because of the bowing on. I wound up just basically putting a flat section across there, and it helps it turn really easy. And then you see on the inside of these little bitty holes, it was kind of tough to get to with those brackets in there. So that's where that spatula really comes in handy, and you can kind of see it right here. This really shows where I have to get in there with that flat scraper and kind of just make it work. But we're going to pull these thickened epoxy here, these fillets, to get that nice and glued and bonded to the hull sides. We're going to let that set up a good bit. I kind of like to hit it when it's still just a little bit tender, because then your glass and all kind of sticks in there. Makes it tough when it's a little bit wet. I'm going back down here in the bottom because I've got a little bit of extra thickened epoxy, and rather than trying to make some compound with it or whatever, I'm just trying to feel the weave of that glass that's down there in the bottom. We're going to talk about that here in a little while, but Now it's just a matter of, you know, going there with some neat epoxy, wetting it out, and then you kind of want to give it a while so that it'll have a chance to kind of get tacky and sticky. So when you put that glass on there, it doesn't run all over the place, because it will, you know, if it's too a rigid top or something like that, it'll want to move around on you a little bit. So it's pretty easy. Now that we've got everything cut, got it cut a little bit long, we just put it in there and just kind of wet it out. That 10 ounce, I don't wet it out on the table too much, because it really is pretty easy to put in. It's a little too fragile, like, for me to wet it out on the table and then try and come and put it in place. It's just easy enough to do it there. And then once again, just take those little clippers and I cut that off. And anytime I'm cutting some of that glass that may have some epoxy on it, I take some denatured alcohol and just kind of run the clippers under it with some denatured alcohol on them, and I hadn't had any problems yet, so it all works out pretty well. You'll also see me there with a little chip brush, and sometimes that little 10 ounce, you know, it's such tight angles going down in there. When you're trying to roll it, it'll start pulling from different directions, but sometimes with that little chip brush, you can just kind of poke it in the right places and lay it down flat. And actually a spatula and a scraper helps there too. And I know I talked about it in the last video, trying to wet out that 1208 from the matte side, but this video was actually done before I started considering all that. So this was also wetted out from the biaxial or the woven side. So we'll have to see how that works out in the future.
Well, like I said, not the best glass job I've ever done. Like I said, this will wind up being the anchor compartment. You probably saw me, I'm spreading a little bit. I had some extra thickened epoxy like down there in that bottom. I'm gonna wind up, I may come back and put some fairing compound on this, just because I want to be able to keep it clean, and all them little textured edges and all them little, the mesh and weave of that glass is gonna hold mold and mildew and whatever. And kind of this in the bilge, I may fair it just so I can make sure that I can keep it clean. We're going to see about that. But I wound up putting 1208 on these sides, which is the same glasses on the side of the hull. I wound up putting those in here, and I may wind up putting a section across the back. Probably not, just for a little more abrasion resistance. Like I said, this will be the anchor locker. Just want to do that. So that's going to wrap up this one. So we're going to keep going and hopefully go to this compartment here next, finish it up.